You said you have something important to tell me.
No secrets.
The night our wives gave birth.
Sometimes it begins with a question, a memory, or a place you thought you would never visit again. The following morning, Jacob woke before everyone else. He quietly folded the old hospital receipt and slipped it into his shirt pocket. Grace, who had just come out of the kitchen, noticed him putting on a clean shirt. She smiled. "You're dressed so early." Jacob forced a smile. "I have somewhere to go." Grace looked surprised. "The workshop?" Jacob shook his head. "No, I'll be back." Before Grace could ask another question, he walked out. Outside, Toby stood across the street, pretending to buy bread from a roadside kiosk. The moment Jacob boarded a bus, Toby quietly entered another bus behind him. "Conductor, follow that blue bus." The conductor laughed. "Who are you following this early in the morning?" Toby smiled awkwardly. "My father." Almost an hour later, the bus stopped. Jacob got down. Toby followed from a distance. Then, Jacob stopped walking. He stood quietly in front of an old building. The faded signboard read, "St. Catherine's Maternity Hospital." Toby frowned. "What is Daddy doing here?" Jacob slowly walked through the hospital gate. Everything looked different now.
Jacob entered the reception. A young receptionist smiled politely. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning. I am looking for any staff from 30 years back." The receptionist checked the computer. "I'm sorry, sir. They retired many years ago." Jacob lowered his head. "I see. Do you know where I can find any?" The receptionist shook her head. "I'm sorry. We don't keep retired staff addresses." Jacob thanked her quietly and turned to leave. Standing outside the reception, Toby quickly hid behind a pillar. His mind raced. Who is Dad looking for? Jacob slowly stepped out of St. Catherine's Maternity Hospital. He paused at the gate. Everything had changed. Inside the hospital, an elderly cleaner watched him leave. She narrowed her eyes. "I know that face." She removed her glasses, then suddenly remembered. That mechanic, he was here the night those two women gave birth. Her expression changed. Without wasting another moment, she hurried toward the nurse's lounge. Across town, Toby sat alone outside the workshop. His friend Chike had joined him again. "You've been thinking too much lately." Toby smiled faintly. "Is it that obvious?" "My brother, you've barely spoken all day." Toby looked down at the engine part in his hand. "Do you believe parents can keep secrets from their children?" Chike shrugged. "Depends on the secret. What if the secret changes someone's entire life?" Chike looked at him carefully. "Did something happen?" Toby hesitated, then slowly shook his head. "I don't know. I just feel my father has been carrying something for a very long time." Chike leaned back. "If that's true, don't force it. Some wounds open only when they are ready." Toby nodded, but deep inside, he had already decided. He was going to find out the truth, no matter how long it took. That evening, Jacob returned home unusually quiet. Grace noticed immediately. "What happened?" Jacob removed his cap. "I couldn't find anyone." "Find who?" He hesitated. "No one." Grace frowned. "You've been acting strangely these past few days." Jacob forced a smile. "I'm just tired." He walked into the bedroom. But outside, Toby stood silently. Every piece of the puzzle only created more questions. He whispered to himself, "What are you hiding, Daddy?" That same evening, the elderly cleaner from the hospital arrived at a quiet street. She stopped in front of a modest bungalow. She knocked gently. A few moments later, Stella opened the gate. The moment she saw the visitor, she smiled. "Auntie Bosse, it's been so many years." The elderly woman smiled. "I was in your area. I thought I'd greet you." The two women sat on the veranda. They chatted about old times. Then, Bosse suddenly became serious. "Stella, I saw someone today." Stella looked up. "Who?"
The mechanic, the one whose wife gave birth on that stormy night. Everything around Stella seemed to stop. Her cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Jacob? Bosse nodded. He came to the hospital today. He was asking whether any of the old staff still worked there. Stella's face turned pale. Did he ask for me? No. He only wanted to know if anyone from that night was still alive. Stella breathed out slowly, but the fear remained. Bosse held her hand.
Stella, is there something you're not telling me? Stella looked away. After a long silence, she whispered, I've carried a burden for 30 years, and I don't know how much longer I can carry it. Bosse frowned. What burden? Before Stella could answer, Amara walked through the gate carrying groceries. Auntie, I bought the tomatoes you wanted. She stopped when she noticed the visitor. Oh, good evening, Ma. Bosse smiled warmly. Good evening, my dear. Stella quickly wiped the tears from her eyes before Amara could notice. I'm coming inside. She stood up too quickly.
The following morning, the Okafor mansion was unusually busy. Housemaids hurried from one room to another. Flower arrangements filled the sitting room. Evelyn walked downstairs. She looked around in surprise. What's happening? The headmaid smiled. Chief asked us to prepare for important guests. Just then, Chief Raymond entered. He looked pleased. Good morning. Evelyn smiled. Who are we expecting? The Adeyemis. Evelyn sighed. Raymond, you are still hoping Daniel will change his mind? Raymond sat down. I haven't given up. He'll understand eventually. Evelyn looked at her husband quietly. You've built businesses all your life, but you can't build love. Raymond smiled faintly. Maybe, but I can still pray. Across town, Grace finished washing clothes outside their small house. She noticed Toby sitting alone beneath the mango tree. He wasn't repairing anything. He simply stared into space. She walked over. My son, what are you thinking about? Toby smiled. Nothing. Grace sat beside him. A mother knows when her child is lying. Toby looked at her. Mama, did Daddy ever tell you about the day I was born? Grace smiled warmly. I remember every moment. It was raining heavily. We had nothing, but when they placed me in her arms, I felt like the richest woman alive. Toby smiled. And Daddy? Grace's smile slowly faded. He hardly spoke. I thought he was worried because of money. She looked at Toby. Why are you asking? Toby quickly shook his head. I was just curious. Grace nodded, but she knew her son wasn't telling her everything. Daniel arrived at community primary school carrying a small bag. Amara smiled. You didn't bring another donation today, did you? Daniel laughed. No, I came to invite you somewhere. Amara folded her arms. Where? There's a cultural festival this Saturday. I was wondering, he hesitated, if you'd like to come with me. Amara smiled shyly. Are you asking me on a date? Daniel laughed nervously. I was hoping you wouldn't call it that. She looked at him for a few seconds, then smiled. I'd love to. Daniel's face lit up. Really? Really? Neither of them noticed. Vanessa had just arrived. She remained inside her car. She saw Daniel smiling in a way she had never seen before. She didn't interrupt. She quietly drove away. As tears filled her eyes, she whispered, So, this is the one he loves. That evening, Vanessa sat with her father. Mr. Adeyemi noticed she had barely touched her food. Vanessa, is something wrong? She smiled faintly. No, Daddy. You've always been a terrible liar. She looked away. Dad, if someone loves another person, should we force them to love us back? Mr. Adeyemi sighed. My daughter, love cannot be bought, but don't stop being the woman God created you to be. Vanessa smiled through tears. I won't. Across town, Stella opened the metal box once more. This time, she removed the faded nurse's ID card. Her fingers trembled. Then she whispered, How much longer can I keep this? Just then, Amara entered. Auntie, I'm going to the market. Stella hurriedly hid everything. All right, I won't be long. As Amara walked away, a folded piece of paper slipped out of the box onto the floor. Neither of them noticed. Outside the house, a sudden breeze blew through the veranda. The paper slowly drifted across the floor and stopped near the doorway. On the top of the page were the words, St. Catherine's Maternity Hospital, delivery record. A few minutes later, Amara returned because she had forgotten her purse. As she bent down to pick it up, she noticed the old hospital document lying on the floor. She picked it up. Curious, she whispered, "Why would Auntie Stella still have a hospital record from 30 years ago?" Before she could open it, Stella's voice came from behind. "Amara, where did you get that paper?"
Amara slowly turned around. The old hospital record was still in her hand. "Auntie, I found it on the floor." Stella hurried over and gently collected the paper from her. "Oh, this?" She forced a smile. "It's nothing important." Amara looked curiously at her. "You looked frightened." Stella laughed nervously. "Did I? You know old people, we panic over little things." She carefully folded the paper and slipped it back into the metal box. Amara noticed her hands were shaking. "Auntie, were you a nurse?" Stella paused, then nodded. "Many years ago." "You never told me." "I retired before you were old enough to understand." Amara smiled. "So that's why you always know what medicine to give everyone." Stella laughed softly. "I suppose so." Amara looked at the metal box again. "You've kept all these memories for a long time." Stella looked away. "Some memories are too heavy to throw away." Amara didn't understand what she meant, but she could tell her aunt was hiding something painful. At the mechanic workshop, a black luxury SUV pulled up outside. Everyone stopped working. Jacob looked up. His heart skipped. It was one of the Okafor company vehicles. The driver stepped out. "Good afternoon. We're looking for a mechanic." Jacob quickly pushed Toby forward. "My son is the best." The driver smiled. "Our company generator broke down. Can he come?" Toby nodded. "I'll get my tools." As the SUV drove away, Jacob stood silently. His eyes followed the vehicle until it disappeared. He whispered, "Take good care of him. Even if you don't know, he's mine." Grace, who had come to bring lunch, heard only the last part. She frowned. "Who are you talking to?" Jacob quickly wiped his eyes. "No one." An hour later, the SUV stopped inside the Okafor Group compound. Toby stepped out. He looked around in amazement. The buildings were magnificent. The gardens were perfectly kept. A staff member welcomed him. "Follow me." As they walked through the reception, the elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped out. He immediately noticed Toby carrying his toolbox. He smiled warmly. "You must be the mechanic." Toby nodded. "Yes, sir." Daniel stretched out his hand. "I'm Daniel." Toby was surprised. Most wealthy men never greeted artisans that way. He shook Daniel's hand. "I'm Toby." Daniel smiled. "Thank you for coming. The staff have been complaining about the generator since morning." Toby laughed. "Let's see what the problem is." As they walked together, Daniel carried Toby's heavy toolbox without thinking. Toby quickly tried to collect it. "Sir, I can carry it." Daniel smiled. "I know, but two people carrying it will get there faster." Toby couldn't help smiling. For the first time, he truly understood why people spoke so highly of Daniel. That evening, as Toby packed his tools to leave, one of the older security guards smiled at him and said, "You know, Oga Daniel treated you like a brother. That's rare. Most rich people won't even shake a mechanic's hand." Then, Toby goes home thinking, why would someone with everything treat me with so much respect? Meanwhile, Daniel calls Amara. "The festival is tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 10. Amara smiles. "I'll be ready." After she hangs up, Stella overhears the conversation. "Daniel again?" Amara blushes. "He's just taking me to the cultural festival." Stella forces a smile, but inside, her heart is troubled. She whispers to herself, "Lord, don't let her fall in love with someone whose life is about to be turned upside down." Late that night, Jacob unlocks an old wooden box hidden beneath his bed. Inside is the tiny baby cap he stole 30 years ago. He holds it tightly, then says, "Tomorrow I'll tell the truth." Unbeknownst to him, Toby is awake. Standing just outside the bedroom door, he hears every word. Jacob arrived unusually early. He was dressed in a clean white shirt instead of his greasy mechanic's overalls. Grace looked surprised. "Jacob, you're not going to the workshop?" Jacob smiled faintly. "I'll be there later. I have somewhere important to stop first." Grace nodded. "Should I come with you?" Jacob shook his head. "No, this is something I have to do alone." Across town, Daniel arrived at Amara's house.
He stepped out of his SUV carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers. Amara opened the gate. She couldn't hide her smile. "You actually brought flowers?" Daniel laughed. "I almost didn't. I wasn't sure if you'd like them." She took the bouquet. "They're beautiful." From the veranda, Stella watched them quietly. She smiled at Daniel's kindness. Then her smile faded. "If only you knew," she thought. Daniel and Amara arrived at the cultural festival. Music filled the air. People danced in colorful traditional attire. Daniel bought roasted corn from a roadside woman. He handed one to Amara. She laughed. "With all your money, you brought me to eat roasted corn?" Daniel smiled. "My grandfather always said, if two people can enjoy simple things together, they'll survive difficult times together." Amara looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel reached into his pocket. He touched a small velvet ring box. He had planned this day for weeks. Jacob stepped out of the church. He took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and brought out his phone. With trembling fingers, he dialed a number. The phone rang. A calm voice answered. "Hello? Chief Raymond Okafor speaking." Jacob closed his eyes. "Chief, my name is Jacob Eze. We've never met, but I have something to tell you. Something that should have been said 30 years ago." Chief Raymond slowly stood from his office chair. "Who did you say you are?" Jacob swallowed hard. "My name is Jacob Eze. I was at St. Catherine's Maternity Hospital the night your son was born." Silence. Raymond's expression changed. "What about that night?" Jacob closed his eyes. "I can't explain everything on the phone, but please, I need to see you." Raymond looked through the office window. "Come to my house this evening. If this is a joke, you will regret it." Jacob replied softly, "It isn't a joke." He ended the call. His entire body shook. 30 years. And there was no turning back. Meanwhile, Daniel and Amara walked along the waterfront after the festival. The evening breeze was cool. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, Daniel stopped walking. "Daniel," she turned toward him. "Yes?" Daniel reached into his pocket. He brought out the small velvet box. Amara's heart skipped. Daniel smiled nervously. "I've never been this afraid." She laughed softly. "Are you afraid?" "Very." He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring. "Amara, you've shown me that kindness still exists. You've reminded me that happiness isn't found in money. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know I want to face it with you." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Amara's eyes. She smiled. Before she could answer, her phone began to ring. She looked at the screen. Auntie Stella. She declined the call. Daniel smiled. "You should answer." She shook her head. "This moment is more important." She looked back at him, then whispered, "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger. They embraced. Neither of them knew their happiness was only hours away from being shattered. That evening, the Okafor mansion was unusually quiet. Chief Raymond sat in the living room. Evelyn noticed his serious expression. "What's wrong?" "I received a strange phone call." Before she could ask another question, the gate opened. The security guard entered. "Sir, the man is here." "Let him in." A few moments later, Jacob walked into the mansion. His clothes were neat, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The moment he saw Daniel's childhood photographs hanging on the wall, his eyes filled with tears. "My son," he whispered inside his heart. Chief Raymond pointed to a chair. "Sit." Jacob remained standing. "I don't deserve to sit." Raymond's patience began to wear thin. "You said you had something important to tell me." Jacob nodded. "I do." He took a deep breath. 30 years of guilt, 30 years of silence finally poured out. "Chief, the night our wives gave birth, I entered the nursery. I exchanged the babies." Silence. Complete silence. Evelyn stared at Jacob in disbelief. Raymond slowly stood. "What? Did you just say?" Jacob fell to his knees. "I believed my son deserved a better life. I thought, if he grew up in your home, he would never suffer. I have lived with that guilt every day." Evelyn burst into tears. "My Daniel," Jacob continued crying. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I couldn't die without telling you." Chief Raymond staggered backwards. His world had just collapsed. At that exact moment, Daniel and Amara arrived at the mansion. They walked in smiling. Daniel noticed everyone was crying. Dad? Mom? What happened? Nobody answered. Jacob slowly turned around. Their eyes met for the first time since Jacob entered the house. Jacob couldn't hold back his tears. I'm sorry. Daniel looked confused. Sorry for what? Chief Raymond looked at Daniel. His voice broke. He says you may not be my son.
Daniel stood motionless. His eyes moved from his father to his mother, then to Jacob, who was still kneeling on the floor. The room was silent. Finally, Daniel spoke. Dad, is this true? Chief Raymond couldn't answer. He slowly lowered his head. Tears rolled down Evelyn's cheeks. My son. She reached for Daniel's hand, but Daniel gently stepped back. He wasn't angry. He was shattered. He looked at Jacob. You mean you took me away from my parents? Jacob nodded, unable to look him in the eyes. I thought I was giving my son a better life. Daniel swallowed hard. And the little boy you took, you grew up believing you were his father? Jacob broke down. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Amara stood frozen. Her engagement ring was still lying on the floor. She looked at Daniel. She had never seen him this broken. She bent down, picked up the ring and held it tightly. Chief Raymond finally found his voice. If what you said is true, then where is my son? Jacob whispered. He's alive. He's my son. Everyone immediately understood. Toby? Just then, the security guard entered. Sir, the mechanic who repaired the generator is outside. Jacob closed his eyes. It is him. Chief Raymond looked at the guard. Bring him in. Outside, Toby had come to return a toolbox that had accidentally been left in the company vehicle. He had no idea what was happening inside. The guard opened the door. Mr. Toby, the chief wants to see you. Toby looked surprised. Me? Yes. He followed the guard into the mansion. The moment he entered, he saw everyone crying. Then he noticed Jacob kneeling on the floor. Dad, what happened? Jacob couldn't speak. Chief Raymond looked at Toby with trembling eyes. What is your name? Toby Eze. And Jacob Eze is your father? Yes, sir. The room became silent again. Raymond closed his eyes, then whispered, My son. Toby frowned. Sir? Evelyn began crying uncontrollably. She slowly walked toward Toby. Her hands trembled as she touched his face. My baby. Toby instinctively stepped back. Ma, I think you've mistaken me for someone else. Jacob couldn't bear it anymore. He covered his face and cried. Stella stood outside the Okafor mansion, clutching the metal box. She took one step toward the gate. Suddenly, a sharp pain gripped her chest. She struggled to breathe. The metal box slipped from her hands. No, not now. She leaned against the fence, trying to steady herself. A passing woman recognized her. Mama Stella, what's happening? I can't breathe. Within minutes, neighbors helped her into a taxi and rushed her to a nearby clinic. The taxi drove away. Inside the mansion, no one knew the woman carrying the answers had just been taken away. Back inside the mansion, Daniel packed a small travel bag. He took only a few clothes, nothing else. Chief Raymond entered the room. He looked at the half-empty wardrobe. His voice trembled. You don't have to leave. Daniel smiled sadly. If Toby is your son, he deserves to live here. Raymond walked closer. I raised you. Daniel nodded. And I'll spend the rest of my life thanking you for that. He hugged Raymond tightly. For the first time in years, Chief Raymond cried like a child. Outside, Toby watched Daniel leave with one small bag. He felt a heaviness in his chest. He whispered, I didn't ask for this. Daniel heard him. He turned back. I know. He walked over, placed the mansion keys into Toby's hand. Take care of them. They're your family now. Toby couldn't hold back his tears. He watched Daniel walk away, alone. Daniel stood at the gate of the Okafor mansion with one small travel bag in his hand. The security guards lowered their heads. One of them couldn't hold back his tears. Young master. Daniel smiled gently. Take care of the house. The guard nodded, unable to speak. Daniel turned and slowly walked away. He never looked back. Upstairs, Evelyn watched from the balcony. Her heart shattered as she saw the boy she had raised for 30 years leave with nothing. She broke down. My son! Chief Raymond held her tightly. Neither of them could stop crying. Inside the mansion, Toby stood in the middle of the living room. Everything felt strange. The expensive furniture, the grand staircase, the sparkling chandeliers. He looked at Jacob. Dad? I don't belong here. Jacob walked closer. His eyes were filled with tears. You do. I should have told the truth years ago. Toby looked around again. He couldn't believe it. Only yesterday, he was repairing cars under the hot sun. Today, everyone called him Young Master. Grace quietly entered the mansion. She stood near the door, looking uncomfortable. One of the maids smiled politely. Welcome, Ma. Grace smiled back. This place is too big. Toby walked over and hugged her. Mama, no matter where I live, you'll always be my mother. Grace kissed her forehead. Don't ever forget where you came from. Toby smiled. I won't. Jacob looked away. Those words pierced his heart. Meanwhile, Daniel arrived at a small rented apartment. The landlord handed him the keys. It's not much, but it's clean. Daniel smiled. It's perfect. He stepped inside. One small sitting room, a tiny kitchen, a single bedroom. The silence felt different. For the first time in his life, he was alone. He placed his bag on the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, looked around the empty room, then quietly whispered, Thank you, Lord. If this is where you want me to begin again, I'll begin again. The following morning, news spread across Lagos. Chief Raymond's real son has finally returned. Social media was buzzing. Business partners arrived at the mansion with gifts. Everyone wanted to meet Toby. One after another, they shook his hand. Congratulations, young master. We've heard so much about you. Toby smiled awkwardly. Thank you. I'm still not used to the attention. Across town, Daniel boarded a public bus. Passengers didn't recognize him. He stood quietly among traders, students, and workers. A woman carrying a baby struggled to stand. Daniel immediately gave her his seat. Thank you, she smiled. God bless you. Daniel simply nodded. Kindness came naturally to him, whether he was rich or poor. Later that afternoon, Vanessa knocked on Daniel's apartment door. Daniel opened it, surprised. Vanessa? She smiled gently. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Daniel stepped aside. Come in. She looked around the small apartment. There was almost nothing inside. No expensive furniture, no luxury, just a young man trying to start over. Her eyes became watery. But she didn't pity him. She admired him. Daniel laughed softly. I know, it's not exactly the mansion. Vanessa looked at him. Do you know what I see? Daniel smiled. What? A man who lost everything except his character. Daniel was speechless. For the first time since leaving the mansion, someone saw his worth beyond his wealth. Meanwhile, at the Okafor mansion, Chief Raymond introduced Toby to company directors. One elderly director smiled. You'll learn quickly. You have your father's company now. The words echoed in Toby's mind. Your company. He looked around the boardroom. The respect, the power, the admiration. It felt good. Very good. A small smile appeared on his face. One that Jacob had never seen before. That evening, Amara sat alone staring at the engagement ring Daniel had given her. Her phone rang. It was her mother. Amara, I heard Daniel isn't the Okafor heir anymore. Is it true? Amara closed her eyes. Yes. Her mother sighed. My daughter, love doesn't pay bills. You've suffered enough in this life. Think carefully before you tie yourself to a poor man. The call ended. Amara looked at Daniel's ring. Tears rolled down her face. For the first time, she began to question her future. 3 weeks later, life had changed for everyone. The newspaper still carried stories about the Okafor family. Everywhere Toby went, people greeted him with respect. Good afternoon, young chief. Welcome, sir. Congratulations. At first, Toby smiled awkwardly. Now, he simply nodded. He was getting used to it. Inside the Okafor mansion, a tailor adjusted Toby's expensive navy blue suit. There you go, sir. It fits perfectly. Toby looked at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the man staring back. The mechanic's overalls were gone. The worn sandals were gone. The grease-stained hands now wore an expensive wristwatch. One of the housemaids entered. Young master, your breakfast is ready. Toby replied without looking at her. I'll come when I'm ready. The maid quietly left. Meanwhile, Daniel had found work, not as the owner of a company, but as a volunteer business advisor at a small youth enterprise center. He wasn't paid much, yet every morning he arrived before everyone else. One afternoon, a young man walked into the office. Sir, I don't have transport fare to return home. Daniel smiled. Sit down first. He bought him lunch, then quietly paid his transport fare. His colleagues watched in amazement. One of them whispered, he has almost nothing, yet he still gives. That evening, Vanessa visited Daniel again. This time, she brought homemade jollof rice. Daniel laughed. Ha, you cooked? Vanessa folded her arms. You don't believe me? I believe you. I'm just trying to imagine how your father allowed the kitchen to survive.
She burst into laughter. For your information, my father asked for a second plate. Daniel smiled. It was the first genuine laugh he had shared since leaving the mansion. Across town, Amara sat with her mother. Her mother held Daniel's engagement ring. My daughter, look at this ring. It is beautiful, but can love feed a family? Amara remained silent. You grew up watching me suffer. You know what poverty did to this family. I don't want that life for you. Tears filled Amara's eyes. Mommy, I love Daniel. Her mother sighed. I know, but love alone isn't enough. She placed the ring back into Amara's hand. Think with your future, not only with your heart. The following day, the Okafor family hosted a charity event. Business leaders, politicians, society's elite, everyone attended. Chief Raymond introduced Toby proudly. This is my son. Applause filled the hall. Toby smiled confidently. For the first time, he enjoyed hearing those words. Across the room, Daniel quietly arrived to deliver documents for the Youth Enterprise Center. He wasn't invited. He came only for work. As he turned to leave, his eyes met Amara's. She wanted to run to him. Instead, she remained where she was, watching him walk away. Vanessa, who had accompanied Daniel, noticed everything. She gently touched his arm. Let's go. Daniel nodded, without saying a word. Later that night, Toby stood on the mansion balcony, looking over the city lights. A company director joined him. You'll get used to this life. Toby smiled. I already am. The director laughed. Good. You were born for it. Those words settled deep inside Toby's heart. You were born for it. He began to believe them. The next afternoon, Amara sent Daniel a message. Can we meet? Daniel read the message. He smiled and danced.
Daniel arrived at the small garden where he and Amara usually met. He smiled as he saw her sitting alone on a bench. She wasn't smiling. Daniel frowned. Amara, you sounded serious. She looked up at him. Her eyes were swollen. She had been crying. Daniel sat beside her. What happened? For a few moments, she couldn't speak. Finally, she whispered, Daniel, we can't do this anymore. Daniel stared at her. What? She closed her eyes. I think we should end this. Daniel laughed nervously. End what? Our relationship. The smile disappeared from Daniel's face. He searched her eyes. Did I do something wrong? She shook her head. No, you've been nothing but good to me. Then why? Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. My life has never been easy. I watched my mother struggle. I watched creditors embarrass us. I promised myself I would never live that life again. Daniel reached for her hand. We'll build our life together. It may not happen overnight, but I'll work. I'll never let you suffer. Amara gently pulled her hand away. Daniel's voice began to shake. Amara, look at me. You know me. You know I won't give up. She looked away. My mother was right. Daniel frowned. What did she say? Amara took a deep breath. She finally said the words she had been afraid to say. Daniel, how do you expect me to build a future with a poor man in this economy? Silence. Those words landed like a knife. Daniel looked at her, unable to believe what he had just heard. You called me a poor man? She quickly shook her head. No, that's not what I meant. It is. He smiled sadly. I've lost the mansion, and suddenly I've lost you too. She cried harder. I still love you, but love doesn't pay rent. It doesn't pay hospital bills. It doesn't put food on the table. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he held both of her hands. Please, don't leave because of money. Stay. I know things are hard now, but give me time. I'll build everything again. I promise you. Amara cried uncontrollably. I can't, Daniel. I don't have the strength to start from nothing. Daniel lowered his head. One tear fell onto their joined hands. He whispered, So, if I was still the Okafor heir, you would still be here? Amara couldn't answer. Her silence said everything. Daniel slowly released her hands. He stood up. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel forced a faint smile. I prayed that if I ever lost everything, I wouldn't lose the people who truly loved me. He looked at Amara one last time. Now I have my answer. He turned and walked away. Amara called after him, Daniel! He stopped, but he didn't turn around. I really did love you, Daniel replied quietly. I know. Then he continued walking, without looking back. Amara collapsed onto the bench, sobbing. As Daniel walked out of the park, a familiar car stopped beside him. The window rolled down. It was Vanessa. She looked at his tear-filled eyes. She didn't ask a single question.
She simply opened the passenger door and said softly, "Get in." Daniel stood there for a moment, then quietly got into the car. The car drove away, while Amara watched from a distance. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake she would ever make.
If you're enjoying this story, please support this channel by liking this video, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. The biggest secret is about to be revealed. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done